Who gets asylum in the United States? Hi, I'm Jim Hacking, immigration lawyer practicing law throughout the United States at our offices in St. Louis, San Diego, and Washington, D.C. We're going to cover all the topics we can in this short video talking about asylum and what you need to demonstrate in order to get asylum. We're going to cover all the basics for immigrants who want to receive asylum in the United States. First up, who is eligible for asylum? So any immigrant who is inside the United States who fears persecution back in their home country is eligible to apply for asylum. Asylum is different than refugees. Refugees are people who are outside the United States who want to come to the United States because of war-torn conditions in their home country. Asylum is for people who are already physically inside the United States. So if you come on a visit visa, if you come on a student visa, if you come any which way, you enter without inspection. If you can get into the United States, you can make a claim for asylum. How do you file a claim for asylum? The way that you file for asylum is by submitting a form called an I-589. That is the form that USCIS uses to allow someone to apply for asylum. You could also apply for asylum in immigration court, but in this video we're talking about affirmative applications for asylum. So when you are inside the United States, if you want to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm here and I fear persecution back in my home country, you do that by submitting an I-589. That's the form that you fill out. There are a lot of questions about your background, about why you fear persecution, what persecution you've experienced in the past. That's one part of the application, but there's also other components to it which generally include your personal statement. So your personal statement is probably the most important piece of your asylum application. This is where you detail as much as you can what happened to you in the past in your home country, what's going on in your home country now, and why you can't go back. What are the categories for asylum? So in the United States, you can get asylum if you're going to face persecution because of one of 5 aspects about yourself that you can't change or shouldn't have to change. And that would be your race, your religion, your membership in a particular social group, your political opinion, and your nationality. So those are sort of the 5 categories. Let's talk about each one. So your race, that's your ethnic background. Your religion, obviously that's the religion that you follow. Your membership in a particular social group. This is a broad sort of catch-all definition that can be used if a lawyer or if someone filing for asylum doesn't feel that they fall into one of the other 5 categories. They can do membership in a particular social group. Your political opinion would be your obviously your firmly held political beliefs. So if you have been part of an opposition party in your home country, or if you've opposed the government that's in force or in power in your home country, that would be your political opinion. And then of course your nationality, and that is your country of origin. So these are the 5 main categories. Now that membership in a particular social group, that can be used for things that aren't one of the other groups. So if you want to say, you know, homosexuals in Guatemala, or you know, people in South Africa who are of an ethnic minority, these are the kinds of things that are going to fall into membership in a particular social group. And then what is persecution? So a lot of people ask about persecution and they think, well, the economy is sort of bad in my home country, or, you know, I like it in America a whole lot better than I do back in my home country. That does not amount to persecution. Persecution means that if the United States were to take you back to your home country tomorrow, that something really, really bad would happen to you, that you would be killed, that you would be jailed, that you would be tortured, that parts of your body would be cut off, that you would be physically harmed severely and mentally and tortured. These are the kinds of things that constitute persecution. Generalized, you know, discomfort, or it's not as easy to live a nice life back in the home country as it is in the United States, that does not amount to persecution. What's the best way to show the risk of future persecution? The best way to show the risk of future persecution would be past persecution. So that is, and this is where your personal statement comes in, that is evidence that in the past you have been persecuted because of one of those 5 protected categories, one of those things about yourself that I mentioned earlier that you shouldn't have to change. So if you can demonstrate sort of severe persecution in the past, then you can definitely, hopefully, make a strong case for future persecution. What does it mean to say you have a well-founded fear of persecution? A well-founded fear means that it's both subjectively and objectively realistic that your fear is real. So if the officer believes that you have a subjective fear of persecution, that you yourself, in your heart of hearts, if they believe you have that subjective fear of persecution, that's going to go a long way. It also has to be objectively realistic. So in other words, you can't just say, oh, I think, these bad men who I don't really know, who's no one really has heard of before, that they might get me. That's so far-fetched and so far from reality. That's not an objectively well-founded fear of persecution. So you're not going to be able to get asylum in the United States unless your fear of persecution is well-founded, that it has a basis in fact. And what if you can live safely in another part of the country? Well, then you're going to have a hard time filing for asylum. If things are just bad in a portion of your country, that's going to make it harder to make a valid asylum application. If you can't live safely anywhere in the country, then that's going to make it much more likely that you'll receive asylum. So if you have a country that's sort of divided into parts, or if there's a safe part and an unsafe part, and you could live in the safe part, assuming you could get to the safe part, that's going to make your asylum case a whole lot tougher to get approved. What about if you can live in a third country? So if you've been given resident status in a third country, that's also going to hurt your chances of receiving asylum in the United States. So would need to show that you don't have the ability to go live in some other country, that your only options are to either stay in the United States or to go back home. If you have that third country option, that's really also going to cut down on your ability to survive a challenge to your asylum case. What happens at your asylum interview? Well, at your asylum interview, the officer is going to go over your application. They're going to look at the facts that you've submitted, and pretty quickly they're going to want to get to the meat of your case. They're not just going to want to hear about generalized conditions in your country. They hopefully will be familiar with the conditions in your country. These asylum officers hear cases from various countries all the time. Some countries they hear more often than others. So if you're from a country where a lot of people have applied for asylum from, you can assume that the officers are going to be very familiar with the conditions in your home country. They might even be more aware of those conditions than you. And so you're going to need to drill down very quickly, because you don't have a lot of time with the officer. Most asylum interviews are 2 or 3 hours. And they're going to want to get to the chase really quickly. They're going to want to understand everything about your case. Why do you feel that you're going to be persecuted? What are the things that have happened to you in the past? What are the things that might happen to you in the future if you go back home? These are the kinds of things that the officer is going to want to focus on. They're not going to want to get distracted. They're going to try really hard to get you to talk about what happens to you if you get sent back tomorrow. What does that persecution look like? How long would it last? How serious would it be, and what could you do to mitigate or to cut down on the chances of that persecution? The asylum interview is not supposed to be adversarial. It's not supposed to be where they're cross-examining you or going hard on you. Some officers do, and you have to definitely be ready. You have to know the facts of your case like this. You have to be able to recite what happened to you and what you think is going to happen to you very clearly. You do have the right to bring a translator. There'll be another translator listening, but you can bring a translator to your interview. But whatever you can do to tell a compelling story, to make sense, and to explain things in sort of a logical fashion. Is it okay to be emotional at your asylum interview? Sure thing. You can definitely be emotional at your interview. Obviously, you want it to be heartfelt. You don't want to be acting or overreacting or embellishing or trying to make your case sound stronger or more dangerous than it is. You got to play it straight. But if you do break down, or if you do have an emotional outbreak, that's okay. And they understand that, and they're sort of prepared for that. And they should give you time to sort of compose yourself and to continue with the interview. That's really what they want, is they want to be able to finish the interview successfully. What happens if my asylum case is not approved by the asylum officer? Well, asylum approval rates have been down historic lows the last few years, and we're starting to see, hopefully those numbers will start rising again. But there are a significant number of officers who are still denying asylum cases at a high rate. So if your case is not approved on the spot or later on by the asylum office, you're going to be referred to the immigration court if you are out of status. So if you're still currently in status, you would maintain that status. But if you've fallen out of status while your asylum case has been pending, you're going to be sent to the immigration court. And at that point, you'll be able to make asylum as a defensive measure. You can try to argue to the immigration judge that you should be allowed to stay as a defense to deportation. And that's sort of your appeal. That's your sort of second chance, your second bite at the apple. And if you are in such a hearing, you need to remember that there's going to be an attorney who's working for the government who's trying to poke holes in your story. This is why it's really important to be as thorough as possible in your initial submission. You don't want to add facts later at your immigration hearing. That looks like you're just making things up to try to make your case stronger. Now, of course, you can remember some things, but if there's too much of that, or if it's just too absurdly new, then the judge and the government attorney are really probably going to look disfavorably on your case. Finally, what does it look like to work with an experienced asylum attorney? So at our office, when we sign up a new asylum case, we spend a lot of time with our client, probably 5-6 weeks, developing the strongest personal statement that we can. We go back and forth with them. We interview them several times until we get a rough outline of the statement, and then we sort of drill down with the client. We go over it over and over, sort of like cooking some soup. You know, you want to put in your ingredients, then you want to let it simmer. You want to add a little spice to it. You want to cook it a little longer. You want to taste it to see if it's good. You want to let it sort of simmer and get better and better. And that's sort of why we take our time with our asylum applications. Now, you do need to file your application within 1 year of arrival in most situations. So we have had to rush on certain times, but generally we're going to take our time, 6 or 8 weeks, to get that asylum application on file. We're also going to, once we do the personal statement, then we're going to go out and find objective news reporting or other kinds of country condition reports that will buttress or support the claims that you're making in your statement. So for example, if you're from Afghanistan and you're from Kabul and you're saying that I'm a Hazara and Hazaras have been persecuted in Kabul, then we're going to go out and get more evidence of the persecution of Hazaras in Kabul, Afghanistan, and that's in the goal of trying to make your case not just about you saying those things, but about objective reporters or objective investigative journalists or objective NGOs who are keeping track of these kinds of things. And we're going to put all that together for you. We're also going to prepare you very well for your asylum interview. We're going to practice. We're going to help you think about how to frame things in your case, either the strengths of your case, the weaknesses of your case. We're going to talk about how best to answer truthfully and completely, and we're going to get you as ready as we can for that interview, and then of course we'll attend that interview with you. So we think there's great value in working with experienced immigration lawyers to get your application in as strong a position as possible when you file and when you go to the interview. So if you have questions about this, give us a call, 314-961-8200. You can email us, info@hackinglawpractice.com. Be sure to join us in our Facebook group, which is called Immigrant Home. If you like this video, we ask that you please share it out on social, that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget, we're going live every single day in January 2022, answering as many of your immigration law-related questions as possible in our Immigration Answers show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.